In the high-stakes world of fashion, where the loudest voices often drown out the truth, one woman chose to stay silent. Melania's name was once synonymous with power, elegance, and dominance, until a scandal brought it all crashing down. But as the world watched, thinking her reign had ended, she had already set her plan in motion. This time, her victory wouldn't be loud, and it wouldn't be public. It would be quiet. And it would be absolute. Get ready for a tale of silence, power, and a woman who proved that the greatest victories are often the ones never seen. The boutique was famous for its high-end fashion. It was not an ordinary store. It was the kind of place where only the richest of the rich shop. The store had luxurious lighting, soft music playing in the background, and designer clothes neatly displayed on racks. Every item in the store had a price tag that could make most people's heads spin. This was a store meant for celebrities, business tycoons, and royalty. As Melania entered, she wore a simple yet elegant dress. It was not flashy, but it was enough to show that she had good taste. She walked with confidence, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She was not there to show off. She was simply looking for something special. But as soon as she stepped inside, the boutique manager noticed her. At first, the manager did not recognize her. She saw a tall, beautiful woman walking in, but in her eyes, Melania did not look like the typical wealthy customers she was used to serving. The manager was used to dealing with celebrities dripping in diamonds or billionaires who made sure everyone knew how rich they were. Melania, on the other hand, was quiet and reserved. She did not act like she was better than anyone else. Instead of welcoming her with a warm smile, the manager gave her a cold, dismissive look. She stood behind the counter, observing Melania as if she did not belong there. The tension was obvious. Something was about to happen, and no one in the store was prepared for it. Melania started browsing through the dresses. She touched the soft fabrics, admiring the craftsmanship. She had an eye for fashion. After all, she had spent years in the modeling industry before becoming the first lady. She knew quality when she saw it. But as she picked up a beautiful designer gown, the boutique manager walked over with a disapproving expression. "Excuse me, ma'am," the manager said in a sharp tone. "Those dresses are very expensive. I don't think they are in your budget." Melania looked up, surprised. She had not expected such rude behavior. She was used to being treated with respect, but this was different. The manager was making assumptions about her, without even knowing who she was. Melania remained calm. She was not someone who got angry easily. Instead of responding, she simply put the dress back on the rack and continued looking. But the manager was not done. "I think you might find something more affordable elsewhere," the manager continued, crossing her arms. "This store is for a certain kind of customer." The words were clear. The manager thought Melania was not rich enough to shop there. She thought Melania did not belong. She was judging her based on her appearance and assuming she was not worthy of being in the store. Other customers in the boutique began to notice the interaction. Some of them whispered among themselves. They recognized Melania. They knew exactly who she was. But the manager did not. Then the insult came. "We don't entertain visitors like you," the manager said, her voice dripping with arrogance. Melania raised an eyebrow. She was not used to being spoken to this way. But she still remained calm. Instead of arguing, she decided to see how far the manager would go. Melania continued browsing, ignoring the manager's rude comment. But the manager was getting impatient. She wanted Melania out of the store. "Ma'am, I have to ask you to leave," the manager said, stepping closer. Melania finally looked at her directly. Her blue eyes were calm, but there was a quiet power in them. The manager still did not recognize her. She still believed Melania was just an ordinary woman trying to shop in a place where she did not belong. "You are wasting our time," the manager said. "This boutique is for serious buyers, not for people who just want to look around." A few customers gasped. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. They knew who Melania was. They knew she could afford anything in that store. But the manager was too blinded by her arrogance to see the truth. Before Melania could say another word, the manager signaled a security guard. "Escort her out," she ordered. The security guard hesitated. He recognized Melania immediately. He knew this was a bad idea. But the manager gave him a firm look, and he had no choice. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the guard said quietly. "I have to ask you to leave." Melania took a deep breath. She had done nothing wrong. She had not caused any trouble. And yet, she was being thrown out like she was a nobody. Without saying a word, she turned around and walked towards the exit. The entire store watched in shock. But what no one knew was that Melania was not done yet. Something big was about to happen. And when it did, everyone, especially the boutique manager, would regret this moment forever. As Melania stepped out of the boutique, she did not look back. She walked away with the same grace and dignity she had when she entered. But inside, she knew that this moment would not be forgotten. She was not a woman who needed to prove her wealth or power. She did not have to argue or fight back with words. She believed in letting actions speak louder. The people inside the store were still whispering. Some of them pulled out their phones, recording what had just happened. They knew this was going to be big. A former first lady treated like she was nothing? Kicked out of a luxury store as if she were not worth the attention? This was something the world would want to know. Melania got into her car, her driver waiting patiently. She sat quietly for a moment, thinking. She was not angry, but she had a lesson to teach. And she knew exactly how to do it. Without wasting any time, she made a few calls. People in her circle were powerful. She did not have to make a scene. She simply had to set things in motion. Meanwhile, inside the boutique, the manager felt satisfied. She had done her job, keeping out people she thought were not worth the store's time. She had no idea that she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. But she was about to find out. The next day, the boutique opened as usual. The manager arrived, feeling good about herself. She had no regrets about what happened the day before. In her mind, she had done the right thing. She had kept her store exclusive. But something was different. The phone was ringing nonstop. Emails were coming in one after another. Customers were canceling orders. People were calling to complain. The store's social media was exploding with comments, and none of them were good. Then, she saw the news. It was everywhere. Headlines screamed about what had happened. Videos from inside the store had gone viral. People were outraged. Luxury boutique insults former first lady, gets what it deserves. Melania Trump kicked out of high-end store, public response. The manager's heart started pounding. She clicked on one of the videos. It showed everything, the way she had spoken to Melania, the insults, the moment she called security. It was all there for the world to see. And the world was not happy. Thousands of comments flooded the internet. How can a store treat someone like this? This manager should be fired. I will never shop there again. People were calling for a boycott. Customers were returning products. The reputation of the boutique, which had taken years to build, was collapsing in just a few hours. And then, the final blow came. The boutique's owner, a wealthy businessman, was furious. His phone had been ringing all morning. Big-name clients were cutting ties with the store. Sales had dropped overnight. The brand's image was now ruined. He stormed into the boutique, demanding answers. When he saw the manager, his face was red with anger. "What have you done?" he shouted. "Do you even realize who you kicked out of this store?" The manager stuttered, trying to explain. But there was no excuse for what had happened. The damage was done. Then came the biggest shock. A representative from Melania Trump's team had sent a letter. It was not a lawsuit. It was not a demand for an apology. It was something much worse for the boutique. Melania had quietly made a move that no one had expected. She had spoken to some of the most influential figures in fashion. Designers who supplied products to the boutique were now reconsidering their partnership. Investors were backing out. The boutique was on the verge of collapse. The manager's face went pale. She had thought Melania was just another random shopper. She had treated her with disrespect, thinking it would not matter. But now, she was watching her entire career fall apart in front of her eyes. And it was all her fault. The moment the video went viral, it was as if the internet had caught fire. People from all over the world reacted with shock, anger, and disbelief. The boutique manager had no idea that her one careless mistake, her decision to insult and kick out a woman she thought was unimportant, would become one of the biggest scandals in luxury retail history. Social media platforms exploded with comments. Thousands of people shared their opinions, and almost no one sided with the boutique. People did not see this as just a simple shopping incident. No, this was about basic human dignity. How could they treat someone like this? One user wrote, "Even if she wasn't Melania Trump, no one should be treated this way." Another person commented, "So, because someone doesn't look rich enough, you kick them out? What kind of arrogant behavior is this?" Within hours, major influencers and celebrities started talking about it. Some of the biggest names in fashion, politics, and business gave their opinions. They were disgusted by how Melania had been treated. Talk shows covered the story. News channels ran reports. The boutique's name was now known worldwide, but for all the wrong reasons. Some former customers of the boutique even came forward with their own bad experiences. People who had been ignored or treated rudely at the store now had the courage to speak up. This boutique always had rude staff. They only care about money, not people. I once went there, and they didn't even say hello to me because I didn't look rich enough. The boutique, once a place of prestige, was now a symbol of arrogance and discrimination. But the worst was yet to come. Because while the internet raged, Melania Trump herself remained silent. And that silence was terrifying. The boutique's owner had built his brand over many years. He had turned it into one of the most exclusive luxury stores in the world. It had been a dream, a symbol of status, a place where only the wealthiest could shop. But now, his dream was collapsing. Sales had dropped overnight. Orders were being cancelled. Major clients, the ones who spent millions every year, were now distancing themselves from the store. The owner sat in his office, staring at his phone. Calls were coming in every second, but none of them were good. His PR team was in full panic mode. We need to do damage control. This is turning into a global scandal. We need to release a public apology immediately. We need to reach out to Melania Trump's team and ask for a meeting. The owner rubbed his forehead. How could one mistake, one simple mistake, destroy everything? He picked up his phone and called the boutique manager. She didn't answer. He called again. Nothing. The boutique manager, the woman who had caused this mess, had now disappeared. She knew that her career was over. No luxury brand would ever hire her again. She had ruined herself. But the owner? He still had one last hope. He personally wrote a letter to Melania Trump. He begged for a meeting. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to explain. He wanted to fix things. He sent the letter, hoping that she would give him a chance. And then, he waited. But when the response came, his heart sank. Melania's team responded with a simple but powerful message. Mrs. Trump does not seek apologies. She believes actions speak louder than words. That was it. No anger. No demands. Just a quiet rejection. But what came next was even more powerful. Melania hadn't just ignored the apology. She had taken action in a way that no one had expected. She personally reached out to some of the most influential figures in the fashion industry. These were people who had the power to make or break brands. One by one, they started cutting ties with the boutique. Luxury designers pulled their product. Investors backed out. Major fashion influencers refused to promote the store anymore. Within days, the boutique lost millions of dollars. It was no longer a symbol of luxury. It was now a brand that no one wanted to be associated with. The owner watched in horror as his empire collapsed before his eyes. And Melania? She never spoke about it again. She didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. Months passed, but the shadow of the scandal still loomed over the fashion world. Industry insiders continued to whisper about the rapid fall of what was once the most revered boutique in the industry. Media outlets occasionally revisited the story, labeling it as one of the most brutal yet silent takedowns in fashion history. Despite new ownership's best efforts to rebrand and revive the store, the damage was done. The boutique's charm, once irresistible to its elite clientele, had worn off. Those who had once flaunted their exclusivity now recoiled, hesitant to be linked to the boutique's tarnished reputation. They moved on to fresher, untarnished trends, leaving the boutique to crumble in its own past. But through it all, Melania remained untouched. She continued her life as if nothing had changed. There were no public statements, no smug interviews, no acknowledgement of the boutique's fate. She never gloated or sought recognition for her role in its demise. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. True power doesn't need to announce itself. The most effective moves are often the quietest, carried out with grace and precision. It's in the stillness where true influence shows its weight. Melania had never been a person who sought revenge. She didn't need to. She understood the value of timing, of knowing when to act and, more importantly, when to let the world draw its own conclusions. By allowing the consequences of her actions to unfold without interference, she had proven that true strength lay not in fighting every battle, but in knowing which ones were already won before they even began. As the boutique's final closure was announced in a quiet press release, the ripple effect was felt across the industry. Competitors, once eager to dethrone the boutique, now found themselves facing a dilemma. The void it left was difficult to fill, but more than that, they saw how one quiet decision could change the fate of an empire. Melania's influence was no longer a whisper in the dark. It was the silent force that guided the future, a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful victories are the ones that go unnoticed. But not everyone was ready to accept it. As Melania continued her journey, the fashion world shifted beneath her feet. A new era was dawning, one where power was no longer flaunted or boasted. It was a world where control was wielded with subtlety, where influence was measured by the changes it created, not the noise it made. But not everyone was content with this quiet revolution. Behind the scenes, there were whispers of a rising force, someone who was beginning to question Melania's methods. The industry had grown complacent, thinking that no one could surpass her. But as with all power, it was never permanent. There would always be those who sought to challenge the established order. Melania was aware of this shift. She had seen the subtle signs, the undercurrents of rebellion, the quiet whispers of those who felt that the new world order she had set into motion had its flaws. They believed that power should be earned through visible struggle, through public acknowledgement of victory, rather than through the quiet manipulation of circumstances. And though Melania had no intention of rushing into another battle, she knew the time would come when her influence would be questioned once again. But by then, she would have already prepared the ground for her next move. For now, she watched as the world continued to turn, knowing that the strongest moves are never the loudest. Continue the days blurred into one another, and Melania's life continued at its usual pace, calm, calculated, and methodical. Her name was no longer on the tongues of the fashion world's elite, yet her influence lingered in the background like a distant hum. The boutique's downfall, though now a part of history, still echoed through the corridors of power, reminding everyone of the quiet force that had orchestrated it. But as with all quiet victories, there were always those who grew restless in the silence. A new player had emerged, Nicolas Duval, an ambitious young designer with a reputation for pushing boundaries and challenging the norms of the fashion industry. His designs were bold, loud, and unapologetic, a stark contrast to Melania's subtle, refined approach. Nicolas became the talk of the town, hailed as the future of fashion. He made waves with his audacious collections and his aggressive marketing campaigns, drawing attention from both critics and fans alike. His rise was rapid, his confidence unshakable. He was everything Melania wasn't, and that made him dangerous. For the first time in years, Melania felt a stir of something unfamiliar, a challenge. It was not that she feared Nicolas, but she recognized in him a force that could disrupt the delicate balance she had worked so hard to create. His loudness, his refusal to be subtle, was a direct contrast to her own philosophy. It was as though the fashion world was swinging back into an era of chaos, where power was to be flaunted rather than quietly wielded. Melania did not rush to react. She had learned long ago that the most powerful responses were those that didn't come immediately. Nicolas's rise was no different. Instead of confronting him head-on or attempting to undermine his success, Melania took a step back and let him carve his own path. She watched, observing, waiting for the right moment to act. Months passed, and Nicolas's reign seemed unstoppable. His shows grew in scale, his celebrity following skyrocketed, and his brand was everywhere. But despite all the noise, there was a subtle undercurrent, a growing sense of dissatisfaction among those who had supported him. His boldness, once refreshing, was starting to feel calculated, his persona manufactured for the public eye. The authenticity that had once made him magnetic was beginning to erode, and the cracks in his carefully crafted empire started to show. Melania saw this before anyone else did. She understood that the louder a person shouted, the more likely they were to trip over their own word. Power built on noise was fragile, while power built on silence was unshakable. And so, without lifting a finger, Melania let the storm play out. She didn't engage in gossip. She didn't fuel the fire. She simply waited, knowing that in time, Nicolas's own ambition would be his undoing. It didn't take long for the cracks in Nicolas's empire to widen. The constant need for attention, the aggressive marketing, and the pressure to outdo himself at every turn began to take a toll. Behind closed doors, his team grew disillusioned, his designs started to feel repetitive, and the public's interest began to wane. The final blow came during his highly anticipated runway show, which was meant to be the pinnacle of his career. The event was a spectacle, an extravagant display of lights, models, and fashion that felt more like a circus than a celebration of artistry. But as the show unfolded, it became painfully clear that Nicolas had lost touch with what made his brand unique. The designs, once groundbreaking, now seemed tired and derivative. The audience's excitement fizzled into indifference. The media, ever hungry for a story, pounced on the failure, calling it the rise and fall of fashion's loudest star. The headlines were everywhere. Nicolas had peaked, and now, his fall from grace was imminent. Melania, meanwhile, remained untouched by the chaos. Her influence, once again, had proven its strength. She had watched as Nicolas's loud ascent had turned into a quiet downfall, all while she kept her distance, observing from the shadows. As the world watched Nicolas's public unraveling, Melania made her move, not with fanfare or grand gestures, but with a single, quiet announcement. She was returning to the industry. This time, however, she wasn't aiming to dominate. She wasn't even seeking to reclaim her former status. She simply wanted to remind the world that true power is not about noise, not about loud declarations, but about lasting influence. Her return was understated, a collection that was minimalist, elegant, and timeless. It was everything that Nicolas's work had lacked: authentic, refined, and, above all, quietly powerful. The industry took notice, not because Melania shouted her presence, but because it was impossible to ignore the weight of her quiet confidence. Her designs spoke for themselves, and with every piece that hit the runway, it was clear that her legacy had not only survived, it had evolved. And so, once again, the fashion world found itself under Melania's sway. She had not fought for her position, had not battled anyone for supremacy. She had simply let the world's loudest voices drown themselves out, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim her place, not by force, but by the undeniable pull of her quiet power. The lesson was clear. true power is never loud. It is the subtle force that moves mountains without a sound. This story is not just about Melania Trump. It is about something much bigger. It is about respect. It is about the power of dignity. It is about how the way we treat people can come back to us in ways we never expect. The boutique manager thought she was powerful because she controlled a luxury store. She thought she had the right to decide who was worthy of shopping there. But in the end, power is not about where you work. It is not about how much money you have. It is about how you treat others. And Melania Trump? She proved that true power does not need to be loud. It does not need revenge. It only needs patience. Because at the end of the day, character always wins.